Have you ever sat in silence, staring at your phone, waiting for a message that never comes? Have you replayed conversations in your mind, wondering if it was something you said? Have you felt your chest tighten when you saw them smile, not at you, but at someone else, and yet you couldn't look away? We all know what it's like to fall for someone who cannot or will not love us back. It's the kind of love that burns quietly yet deeply, leaving scars no one else can see. We tell ourselves to move on, to let go, but somehow we're drawn to them again and again. Why do we do this? Why do our hearts insist on chasing those who cannot stay? Today we're going to uncover the reasons, psychological, emotional, even spiritual, behind this heartbreak. And by the end, you may finally understand yourself better and take your first step toward healing. It begins as a spark, subtle, quiet, almost unnoticeable. Maybe it's the way they keep their distance, the way their eyes seem to hold a secret, or the way they're here one moment and gone the next. There's something about their mystery that pulls you in like a moth to a flame. They don't text back right away, they cancel plans, they hesitate to call you theirs. And yet, the more they pull away, the more you find yourself chasing them. This is the paradox of loving the unavailable. The less they give, the more you want. On the surface, it doesn't make sense. Love should feel safe, mutual, warm. But instead, you find yourself in a cycle of longing and rejection, hope and despair. You're left wondering, why can't I stop wanting someone who clearly doesn't want me? Part of the answer lies in the way we confuse love with longing. Many of us grew up learning that love is something we have to earn, by proving ourselves, by waiting, by sacrificing. So when someone makes us work for their affection, it feels familiar. And familiarity, even when it hurts, can feel like home. Sometimes we mistake tension for connection. The anxiety that builds when they withdraw feels alive, electric. And when they finally throw you a scrap of affection, it feels like water in a desert. That moment of relief becomes addictive, even though it never lasts. There's also the allure of the challenge. Something deep inside us believes that if we can just make them see our worth, if we can just break through their walls, then we'll finally feel whole. We tell ourselves that winning their love will prove we are lovable. But here's the truth. Their inability to love you has nothing to do with your worth, and everything to do with their own wounds. We're drawn to the unavailable because they awaken a kind of hope inside us. The hope that we can be the one who changes them. We imagine ourselves as the exception to their rule, the person who heals them, who finally unlocks their heart. That hope can be intoxicating. Sometimes it feels safer to love someone who can't love you back. You may not even realize it, but deep down you might be afraid of what would happen if someone actually loved you fully. Would you feel exposed? Would you know what to do with that kind of intimacy? And so you find yourself drawn to those who keep you at arm's length, because their distance allows you to keep your own walls up too. Then there is the illusion of depth. The unavailable often appear complicated, enigmatic, profound, but what you're often seeing is not depth, but avoidance. We romanticize their silence, their moodiness, their reluctance to let us in, imagining layers of meaning that may not exist. We project our own desires onto them, filling in the gaps with fantasies. We mistake their coldness for strength, their absence for independence, their emotional detachment for mystery. And in doing so, we ignore the reality right in front of us. They are simply unable or unwilling to meet us where we are. Yet even when we realize this, we stay. We stay because they reflect something inside us, a wound, a story, a belief that we are only worthy when we are chasing. This is the heartbreak no one talks about. We don't just fall for them by accident. We fall because they remind us of something we've always known. But the good news is, once you see the pattern, you can begin to change it. In the next chapter, we'll explore the psychology of attachment and how the way you learn to love as a child still shapes the love you seek as an adult. If you want to understand why you keep falling for people who can't love you back, you need to look at where you first learned what love is supposed to feel like. Long before your first heartbreak, long before you even knew what romance was, you were already learning about love, quietly, unconsciously, through every look, every word, and every silence from the people who raised you. Psychologists call this attachment theory. It's one of the most important frameworks for understanding human relationships. And yet most of us live our entire lives without ever realizing how much it controls us. At its core, attachment theory says this: the way you bonded with your caregivers as a child becomes the blueprint for how you bond with others as an adult. If you grew up feeling safe, valued, and seen, you likely developed a secure attachment. You learned that love is consistent, that closeness is safe, and that you can trust people to show up for you. But not everyone gets that. Some of us grew up with love that felt unpredictable, sometimes warm, sometimes cold. We learned that affection could be taken away without warning, that we had to earn it by being good enough, quiet enough, helpful enough. This often creates what's called an anxious attachment. People with anxious attachment tend to crave closeness but also fear abandonment. They worry constantly about whether they're lovable, whether the other person will leave. If this sounds familiar, it's no wonder you're drawn to the unavailable. Their distance activates your deepest fear and your deepest hope at the same time. Then there's avoidant attachment. These are the people who learned early on that closeness wasn't safe, that opening up would only lead to pain or rejection. They grow up valuing independence, building walls around their hearts. And here's where the trap is set. People with anxious attachment often find themselves irresistibly drawn to people with avoidant attachment. It's a painful dance. You reach out, they pull away. You try harder, they withdraw further. You mistake their emotional distance for strength, while they see your need for closeness as overwhelming. This dynamic, anxious, and avoidant is incredibly common. And it feels familiar because it mirrors what you experienced growing up. We don't consciously choose it. But the part of us that learned love in chaos feels at home in it. It's not just theory. You can feel it in your body. Your heart races when they finally text you back. Your stomach drops when they don't answer your call. You lie awake at night analyzing every word, every glance, every silence. The chemistry you feel with them isn't necessarily love, it's often just your nervous system recognizing a pattern it already knows. Somewhere deep down, you may believe that if you can just get this person to love you, it will heal all the pain of being unloved before. But here's the truth. No one else can heal those wounds for you. Recognizing your attachment style is the first step. Ask yourself, when someone pulls away from me, do I chase harder? Do I feel unworthy unless I'm proving myself? Or do I feel suffocated when someone gets too close? Understanding your patterns doesn't make you weak, it makes you free. Because once you see the cycle, you can start to choose differently. Of course, knowing isn't enough on its own. Healing takes time. But just naming what's happening is powerful. You can say to yourself, this longing I feel isn't about them, it's about me. It's about what I learned love was supposed to feel like, and I can learn something better. In the next chapter, we'll go even deeper into the unconscious forces that keep us chasing the unavailable, even when we know better. Because sometimes what we're really chasing isn't a person at all. It's a part of ourselves we left behind long ago. Even after you learn about attachment, even after you understand that your nervous system is responding to old wounds, there's still a question that lingers. If I know this is hurting me, why can't I stop? Why do I keep going back? Why do I keep choosing the same kind of person over and over, even when I swear I've learned my lesson? The answer lies deeper than thought. It lives in the unconscious, the part of you that quietly runs the show when you're not looking. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the collection of parts of yourself you've buried because you were told they were unacceptable, unworthy, or too painful to feel. These hidden parts don't go away. They wait. And they speak to you through your choices, your reactions, your attractions. When you fall for someone who can't love you back, you're not just seeing them, you're seeing your own shadow reflected in their eyes. Maybe they're emotionally unavailable, just like one of your parents. Maybe they withhold affection, just like the people you tried to please as a child. Your unconscious remembers. It remembers what it feels like to chase love and never quite reach it. It remembers what it feels like to hope for a touch, a kind word, and receive silence instead. And so it searches for what is familiar, because familiar feels like home, even when it hurts. This is what psychologists call repetition compulsion, an unconscious drive to recreate old wounds over and over in the hope of finally healing them. You may not even realize it, but part of you believes, if I can just get this kind of person to love me, maybe it will undo all the pain that came before. But the problem is, you're trying to finish a story that doesn't have an ending, at least not the way you're playing it now. It's like trying to heal a cut by picking at it over and over. You don't need to finish the story. You need to stop telling it. Here's the other thing about the unconscious. It doesn't speak in words. It speaks in feelings, in symbols, in patterns. That's why these relationships feel so intense. Why they light you up and break you down in ways no healthy relationship ever seemed to. Because they touch something ancient inside you. Sometimes we even confuse their rejection for love, because it matches what love felt like when we first learned it. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that's exactly what happens here. You call it fate when you meet someone who feels like your type. You say, "We just have this incredible chemistry." But what you're really feeling is the pull of your shadow asking to be seen. So what do? First, you stop blaming yourself. This isn't about weakness or foolishness. This is about an old wound asking to be healed. Second, you bring the shadow into the light. You start asking hard questions. What does their rejection remind me of? When was the first time I felt invisible, unworthy, or not enough? Who taught me that love has to hurt? And then you grieve, because underneath the chase is a grief that's been waiting for years. Grief for the child who didn't feel chosen. Grief for the love you didn't get. Grief for the years you spent thinking it was your fault. When you allow yourself to feel that grief, something remarkable happens. The spell begins to break. You see the unavailable person clearly, not as the key to your happiness, but as a mirror showing you where you still need to heal. And slowly you stop chasing them because you're finally turning toward yourself. In the next chapter, we'll explore why the impossible feels so alluring and why we confuse chaos and heartbreak for passion. Because understanding the shadow is only the beginning. You also need to understand why we romanticize the impossible. There's something intoxicating about what you can't have. Something irresistible about the one who keeps slipping through your fingers. You know it's out of reach, yet the more impossible it seems, the more deeply you want it. Why? Why does the unattainable shine so much brighter than what's already in your hands? Part of it is simple psychology, the scarcity effect. When something is rare, our minds assign it more value. We're wired to believe that what's hard to get must be worth having. But it goes deeper than that. When someone is just beyond our grasp, they become a canvas for our fantasies. We fill in the blanks with everything we want them to be. We imagine their silence means depth, their coldness means strength, their distance means mystery. We project our ideal onto them, turning them into a character in the story we want to tell. The impossible is alluring because it's not real, at least not in the way we imagine it. It's also about the chase itself. Your brain releases dopamine, the chemical of anticipation, not when you get what you want, but when you're reaching for it. The closer you get, the more your brain rewards you. But when you finally catch it, the dopamine drops. So the cycle continues. You keep reaching, and they keep staying just out of reach. And that feeling of almost having it becomes addictive. Then there's the idea of redemption. We love the thought of being the one who breaks through their walls, who makes them change, who finally heals them. It makes us feel special, chosen, powerful. We mistake their resistance for a test we're meant to pass. But here's the hard truth. Their inability to love you is not a challenge to overcome, it's a boundary to respect. We confuse chaos for passion because we've been taught to believe that love is supposed to hurt. Movies, books, songs, they glorify the dramatic, the tragic, the impossible. We grow up watching stories where love means chasing, suffering, sacrificing, where the happiest endings are the hardest won. And so, when love comes easy, we doubt it. We think, if it doesn't hurt, it must not be real. We mistake calm for boring. We mistake kindness for weakness. And we mistake heartbreak for depth. But love doesn't have to be a battlefield. True intimacy, the kind that nourishes rather than drains you, doesn't come from chasing the impossible. It comes from choosing what's real, even if it's not wrapped in drama and mystery. The allure of the impossible isn't about them. It's about you. It's about what you believe you deserve and what you're willing to settle for. Once you see that clearly, the spell begins to fade. You stop asking, how can I win them? And you start asking, why am I choosing this? In the next chapter, we'll look even closer at why we stay, even when we know it's hurting us. Because understanding the allure is one thing, but walking away, that's where the real work begins. You've seen the signs. You've felt the ache. You've told yourself 1,000 times that you deserve better. And yet, you stay. Why? Why do we hold on to people who hurt us? Why do we keep showing up for someone who never shows up for us? It's easy to say, because we love them. But love is only part of the story. One reason we stay is something psychologists call the sunk cost fallacy. The more time, energy, and emotion you invest in someone, the harder it feels to walk away, even if you know it's not working. You think, but I've already given so much. If I leave now, it will all have been for nothing. And so you stay, pouring more of yourself into a well that can never be filled. Another reason we stay is what's called intermittent reinforcement. This is the same principle used in gambling. They're cold, distant, and then suddenly they throw you a crumb of affection. A text at midnight. A fleeting compliment. A few hours where they seem to care. And that little scrap of warmth keeps you hooked because it makes you believe that if you just try a little harder, love will finally come. The truth is, this kind of love creates a chemical addiction. The highs feel so high because the lows are so low. Your body becomes addicted to the roller coaster. And the longer you ride it, the harder it is to imagine stepping off. Then there's the hope, the most dangerous reason of all. You cling to the idea that if you can just prove yourself, if you can just love them enough, they will finally change. You imagine a future where they wake up one day, realize how much you mean to them, and finally give you the love you've been waiting for. But that day never comes. And still you wait. Sometimes we stay because we're afraid of what would happen if they actually did love us back. It sounds strange, but intimacy can be terrifying. Because if someone truly saw you, if they truly opened their heart to you, then you'd have to open yours too. You'd have to let them see the parts of you that you've kept hidden even from yourself. So you choose someone who can never really get close, because their distance protects you from having to be fully seen. We tell ourselves that we stay because we're strong, because we're loyal, because we don't give up easily. But often we stay because it feels safer to stay in the pain we know than to face the unknown without them. Here's what you need to hear. You are not weak for staying. You stayed because you didn't yet know another way. But there is another way. You can leave. You can heal. You can find love that doesn't hurt. You don't have to keep proving yourself to someone who has already shown you they can't give you what you need. You don't have to keep hoping they'll change. Because the one who needs to change isn't them, it's you. Not because you're broken, but because you deserve more. You deserve a love that doesn't feel like a war. In the next chapter, we'll look at the myths that keep us stuck, the stories we tell ourselves about love that make us believe suffering is romantic and pain is proof of devotion. Because before you can walk away, you have to unlearn what you've been taught to believe about love. Even when you begin to see the pattern, even when you realize the pain, something inside you whispers, "But this is what love is supposed to feel like," and that's where the trap tightens. Because many of us have been taught myths about love that keep us clinging to what hurts. One of the most powerful myths is this: if I love them enough, they will change. We're told that love is redemptive, that it has the power to heal even the deepest wounds, and it's true that love can be transformative. But only if the other person is willing to do the work themselves. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. You can't love someone into wholeness if they're committed to staying broken. Another myth is that love is supposed to hurt. We grow up hearing that love is sacrifice, that it's hard work, that the more you suffer, the more meaningful it is. And so when we find ourselves in relationships full of longing and pain, we tell ourselves, this must be real love because it hurts so much. But pain is not proof of love. Love is not meant to feel like walking on glass, always one wrong step away from bleeding. There's also the myth that you have to fight for love. This is one of the most dangerous stories we tell ourselves. We confuse struggle with passion. We believe that the more difficult it is, the more it must matter. We see this everywhere, in movies, in books, in songs. The lovers who overcome impossible odds. The hero who wins the heart of someone who rejected everyone else. The idea that being chosen by someone who is incapable of love makes you special. But here's the truth. Love doesn't need to be earned. Healthy love doesn't make you prove yourself over and over. It doesn't hide behind walls and make you climb them just to catch a glimpse. Then there's the myth that leaving means failing. We tell ourselves that if we walk away, we're giving up, that staying is a sign of strength, of loyalty, of perseverance. But sometimes staying is the easiest thing to do because it lets you avoid facing the fear of being alone. And sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you'll ever do. We also believe the myth that if we leave, no one else will ever love us. This is the cruelest lie. It keeps you stuck because it makes you believe this pain is the best you can get. It convinces you that your worth is tied to this person's approval. But their inability to love you says nothing about your worth, and everything about theirs. Once you let go of these myths, the spell starts to break. You realize that love is not about fixing someone else. It's not about proving yourself. It's not about suffering. It's about choosing and being chosen freely. Love is not a war to win or a burden to bear. It's a quiet place where you can finally put your armor down. In the next chapter, we'll talk about how to break the cycle, how to stop chasing love that hurts and start building the kind of love you truly deserve. Because now that you see the myths for what they are, you can finally write a different story. You've seen the pattern. You've felt the pain. You've recognized the myths. And now comes the hardest and most important part, breaking the cycle. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. You can't keep pretending that this kind of love, the kind that leaves you hollow, is what you deserve. So how do you stop? How do you walk away from someone who feels like your whole world? How do you learn to choose love that heals instead of love that hurts? It begins with awareness. You start by naming the pattern, saying it out loud, admitting to yourself, I am chasing someone who cannot love me because some part of me believes this is all I deserve. There's power in naming it, in shining a light on the shadow. Then comes acceptance. You have to grieve the truth that this person will not become who you need them to be. Let yourself feel the sadness, the anger, the disappointment. Because only when you stop clinging to the fantasy can you begin to embrace reality. The next step is inner work. Start tending to the parts of yourself that you've been ignoring while you poured all your energy into them. Talk to the child inside you who still believes love has to be earned. Tell them, you don't have to chase anymore. You don't have to prove anything. You are already enough. One way to do this is through journaling. Write down the moments you felt most rejected or unseen. Notice how those moments echo the way you feel with this person. Another way is therapy. A good therapist can help you untangle these patterns and learn how to set boundaries. And then there's shadow work. Learning to love the parts of yourself you've buried so you stop looking for someone else to complete you. You can also start practicing secure attachment behaviors even if you didn't grow up with them. Learn to communicate your needs calmly. Learn to tolerate silence without panicking. Learn to recognize when someone's behavior says more about them than about you. Choose people who choose you not because they're perfect, but because they're present. Learn to trust your own feelings instead of chasing someone who makes you doubt them. You deserve someone who meets you where you are, not someone who keeps you waiting in the doorway. And you deserve to be whole, even when you're alone. Because healthy love starts with choosing yourself. When you stop trying to earn someone else's affection, you create space for someone who can actually love you without conditions. And here's the beautiful part. The more you love yourself, the less interested you become in chasing those who don't. You stop seeing their distance as desirable. You stop seeing their rejection as a challenge. You stop seeing their silence as mystery. And you start seeing it for what it is, a sign they're not ready and that you are. In the next chapter, we'll explore what happens when you finally choose yourself, how letting go of what hurts makes space for love that truly heals. Because walking away is not the end of your story, it's the beginning of a better one. There comes a moment, quiet but undeniable, when you realize that the person you've been waiting for isn't them. It's you. It doesn't happen all at once. At first, it felt like a loss, like something inside you has been torn away. But over time, that emptiness starts to feel like space. And in that space, something new begins to grow. When you stop chasing people who can't love you back, you give yourself the chance to finally see who you are without them. You discover that you are not just someone who waits. You are not just someone who pleads, who bends, who proves. You are someone who deserves to be chosen, not in spite of who you are, but because of it. Choosing yourself means learning to sit in your own company without fear. It means finding joy in your own presence. It means realizing that love is not something you have to beg for. It's something you can already feel within you. When you choose yourself, you stop mistaking pain for passion. You stop mistaking distance for depth. You begin to see clearly the way they pulled away wasn't mystery, it was avoidance. The way they stayed silent wasn't strength, it was fear. The way they couldn't love you wasn't a test, it was the truth. And that truth sets you free. You stop asking, why don't they love me? And you start asking, why did I believe their love was the only thing that made me whole? Because the most important love you will ever know is the one you give yourself. And here's the secret. When you choose yourself, everything changes. You no longer tolerate crumbs. You no longer chase what runs from you. You no longer shrink yourself to fit into someone else's empty hands. You walk away from what hurts, not because you stopped loving them, but because you started loving yourself more. And in that choice, you reclaim your power. You become someone who no longer waits to be chosen because you already are. Someone who no longer begs to be seen because you see yourself. Someone who no longer fears being alone because you've learned that solitude is not the absence of love, but the space where love begins. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you stop loving others. It means you stop abandoning yourself to do it. And when you stand in that truth, when you finally stop chasing those who can't love you back, you make room for someone who can. Because love, real love, doesn't come from proving your worth. It comes from knowing it. And when you know it, you'll never again settle for less. You don't have to keep repeating this story. You don't have to keep chasing what hurts. You don't have to keep proving yourself to people who can't see you. You can stop. You can choose you. And when you do, you open the door to love, the kind that stays, the kind that heals, the kind that feels like home. So now I ask you, have you ever loved someone who couldn't love you back? What did it teach you about yourself? Share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to hear it today. And remember, you are already enough. You are